open the evening by letting you know that I appreciate you being here this evening for the Stanley County Candidates Forum. My name is Kathy Almond. I'm president of Stanley County Chamber of Commerce. And before we get started this evening, based on an obituary that was in today's paper, we have a former county commissioner and a former City of Albemarle City Councilman, Mr. Ed Underwood, who has passed away. If you'd please take just a couple moments of silence, please, in Ed's memory. Thank you. We thank Ed and all those others who have provided service for our county and for our cities. We thank everyone for being here this evening. We thank the candidates. We thank the guests. And I also want to thank you all as voters for coming out to be well-informed voters as we proceed into this election year. I have a couple of board members here this evening from the Chamber of Commerce that I would like to acknowledge. I know our chair-elect is on his way here. He had a Stanley Community Foundation meeting tonight, and that is Mr. George Crooker with Stanley County Family YMCA. He is our chair-elect. Our treasurer, Will Honeycutt, CPA, I think is also here in the room. Lori Ivy, who's our programming chair with Cooperative Extension for Stanley County, is here. And most importantly, and you'll hear him a lot tonight, for tonight's event is our Legislative Committee Chair, Dr. Michael Ryman, to my right. Dr. Ryman came on our board this year and hit the ground running. He's led our Porks and Politics event, our legislative breakfast, and now this Stanley County Candidates Forum. So I'm hoping he won't run away after a full year. The Stanley County Candidates Forum is something Stanley County Chamber of Commerce has been doing in excess of 25 years. And we want to continue this throughout the community to inform every one of candidates and the opportunities that they have, and we appreciate you being here to learn. I also want to let you know that Stanley Community College is videotaping this evening. Once we have the tape edited and I get the link, we will upload that to our website from the Chamber of Commerce. You'll be able to share that link. I will post it on our Facebook page as well as on our website and push the word out. Maybe a couple of days, but don't hesitate to email me. I'll be glad to push it out as quickly as I can. And you can pass it along to those that you would like to hear the forum that were not able to be here this evening. Just a couple of logistics and ground rules. We do have restrooms in the back of the room. They're to the back left. Your conversations. If you wish to have conversations, we ask that you please take them to the outside parking lot or to the outside hallway and keep the room as quiet as possible so others can hear, and be respectful of all those who speak. I would like to let you know we have some sample ballots. There's large yellow papers in the back of the room on the back table, so sample ballots for the election that's coming up on November 6th. We also have copies of the FAQ sheet that Stanley County produced regarding the quarter-cent sales tax. Your Stanley County Chamber of Commerce Leadership Board voted to support the quarter-cent sales tax for the upcoming election. So I ask that you please take that FAQ sheet and take a serious look at it. This is a very important tax for our county, and I urge you on behalf of our board to support this tax. At this time, in order to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ryman. Is there anything I've forgotten?
You're good.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ryman. Again, grab one of us if you need anything, and we appreciate you being here this evening.
If the candidates, can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right, I'll try to speak close. The first race that we have this evening is City Albemarle District 2, which involves Ms. Shirley Louder and Mr. Benton Dry. If they can make their way up to the stage, and I'll explain how this is all going to work while they're moving up to the stage. The Board of Elections assures me that the way people are placed on the ballot is by a random alphabetic generator, and so it's by chance where your name is listed on the ballot. Tonight the first question that we're going to give the candidates will come in the way that the candidates are listed on the ballots. And then the second question will be in reverse order. I feel like I got to talk right into this thing. So the first two questions will be the same for all candidates. And then the third question may or may not be the same. And I will not reveal that until I give you that question. So if you would go up on the stage and Kathy will direct you up there. And I'll introduce you folks.
Looking towards the audience.
Our first candidate up for Albemarle City Council District 2 is Ms. Shirley Louder, whose party of affiliation is Republican. She's a retired educator. I'm going to read the first question to Ms. Louder. The voters of Stanton County are being offered a chance to pass a 1/4 of a penny sales tax which should benefit our public schools. The Board of Education and county commissioners both have come out in support, as well as several town councils. Do you support this referendum, and why or why not?
Yes, I do support. Reason being, I guess, mostly is I've worked in the schools for 35 years. And I saw so many problems that were not being addressed sufficiently. It certainly doesn't mean they weren't doing their job, but you just didn't have enough sources. So I know that the present commissioners have already had to have a price hike in our taxes, and we hope that this one will be sufficient to carry us through the next 4 years. We never know, though. But I think that the schools know a lot about drugs. They know how to deal with it if they get some instructions. It's been loosely coordinated throughout history, but this would give us an extra smack to the things that we weren't able to do because of money. Yes, I do want this to pass.
The candidates have 2 minutes per question. Ms. Louder took less than that. And so, Mr. Dry, you have the same question. Would you like me to read it again?
No, sir. I am in support of this sales tax. There's a lot of reasons, folks. When you go back and you start looking at the condition of our schools and you look at the condition of this world, things are not good. We've got to take the initiative as citizens to help our system grow and help our schools. That the most important resource that we have in this entire world is our human resource. And that is our children. That is our future. If we don't do the things to protect them, provide them with an opportunity to have an excellent education without fear, then we've let them down. We grew up in a time far better than this. We didn't have to worry about the opioids that are out there today. We didn't have to worry about someone coming in to our schools with an automatic weapon. It's a fact of life today. We've got to do everything that we can, money-wise, and our voices are greater than that 1/4 cent sales tax. We have got to raise our voices. We've got to let everybody know what our view is. Our system is in trouble. I think Dr. James is on the right path, but we have to have a voice in support of improving our schools. I have personal views I'll be happy to share with some of you at any time, but I'm not going to do that tonight. But I am in support of this 1/4 cent sales tax, and I hope that each and every citizen will look at it as a step in the right direction to help the most important resource that we have, and that is our children. Thank you.
I apologize, I didn't introduce Mr. Dry. He's Mr. Benton Dry, whose party of affiliation is Democrat, and Mr. Dry is a local businessman that's currently serving on the city council. The second question goes to Mr. Dry. Several announcements have been made recently regarding economic development in downtown Albemarle. What is your assessment of downtown development and its success or failure?
Thank you. Our downtown needs our help. As a city council, we implemented a streetscape program a few years ago, and we're gradually implementing that program. If you go up to the square on 2nd Street down to 1st Street, you see where we've cut in, and it's sort of a terracotta color. There's banners that have been put up throughout the city. There's a lot of other things that we're going to do. One thing I think we have to remember in terms of economic development for downtown are those people that have buildings right now. There are a lot of buildings in disrepair, but they've had no motivation to fix them, because if they did, it would have increased their tax rate from where they are based on how much they spent to refurbish these buildings. But today, they have the motivation. Pfeiffer has come in, and we all know what's happened there. There is not a building left in 5 Points that's not owned by local people. There are houses that are being bought close to downtown that are going to be refurbished, and they will be made into apartments. We have a great deal of pride in our city. Along with the ADDC, we are making strides day in and day out. Last week, there were 2 grants awarded by the ADDC. One to Mark Louder, I think was about $5,000, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the other one. My memory is not as good as it was a few years ago. However, we are committed to improving the downtown. When you look at 5 Points Public House, they just celebrated 1 year, and they say it has been a fantastic year. Tiffany has moved up to the boardroom. We are positioned for growth in our downtown area. And through retail strategies that we have employed, they're looking at all ways to increase our retail involvement as well as retaining the businesses that are there today. And we're going to have a great future there, folks.
Ms. Louder, do you have the same question? Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think I remember that. Downtown development is a big ordeal. It costs a lot of money. We need to be very careful about the projects that we choose. Now, I'm not talking about Pfeiffer. I think that's a wonderful deal that we have. As one of my friends would say, there's nothing like a college town. And they've already started on the construction and reconstruction of properties that will suit Pfeiffer to a T, because they're part of it in designing that. And when we get that done, I think most people will see the difference in the town. Now, we have to continue other kinds of development too. One of the things that the commissioners have already done would be that they bought up property that will go really well for industry. You know, we've got to get the people to buy it. And they're doing a good job with that so far. But we cannot let downtown Albemarle go. We've got to pick up, and the properties that have been hard to purchase, we're going to have to work harder on the people that own the properties, because it's a shame to let our town have water in it when it's not even a flood. Thank you.
The third question goes to Ms. Louder. The city of Albemarle offers multiple services to citizens. What are the strengths and weaknesses of those services?
First of all, I have to think about the services that I receive from the city, and I'm very proud of it. I've heard some people complain about things, and we'll have to look into those things, but I have not met with any problems that the city has control of. I hope that instead of talking about it to other people, they will end up at City Hall and talk with the people that they need to there that can explain exactly what's going on. They'll find out for you and give you an answer. And that's what only thing I can say about the services that I receive. And I haven't heard any complaints from anybody else either. Thank you.
Mr. Dry, this question is the same. The city of Albemarle offers multiple services to citizens. What are the strengths and weaknesses of those services?
I'm sorry, Ms. Lauder was asking me a question. Would you repeat that, please?
Yeah, okay. The city of Albemarle offers multiple services to citizens. What are the strengths and weaknesses of those services?
First of all, let me take you back just a few weeks ago when Hurricane Florence came through, and then right after that, Hurricane Michael. If you looked out, you saw the most valuable people that this city employs, and that's our employees, out in flooding waters, trying to get to a place to ensure that everybody who has electricity would get it back shortly. I live on the west side of town. Neither storm did we lose it. That our folks are out there. We have the best employees in the world. When you look at all of our services across the board, we have so many that even large cities don't have, from a landfill to recycling, solid waste pickup, and the list goes on and on and on. And when you look at the fire department, the police department, look at the calls that they make every single day. They're in the hundreds, and there's a lot of reasons for that. However, we've got great people which make those services extremely important to each of us, and those are the services, when you flick the light switch, your lights come on. When you turn on the water faucet, your water comes on. It would be a dire world if you hit that switch or turn that valve and nothing happened. With that said, I can't say, I interface with these people on a daily basis. So be it right, be it wrong, they are without a doubt the best, and I will continue to work with them to ensure that your needs are met day in and day out, because you're important to the city of Albemarle and you're going to be a part of that growth, and we thank you.
Let's give these candidates a hand. The candidates for City of Albemarle District 4 could come up, Mr. David Morgan and Mr. Chris Wisdom. We're a couple minutes ahead of schedule. We'll try to stay on schedule. We've tried to allot enough time, but frequently we don't have enough time, so it's tight to figure this out. I'm going to go ahead and begin, and if we gain time as we go, we'll take a break. So our first candidate up For Albemarle City Council, District 4 is Mr. David Morgan, whose party affiliation is Democrat. And Mr. Morgan is a local businessman and former county commissioner. And the first question, Mr. Morgan, is the voters of Stanley County are being offered a chance to pass a quarter-of-a-penny sales tax, which will benefit our public schools. The Board of Education and County Commissioners both have come out in support, as well as several town councils. Do you support this referendum, and why not?
Thank you, Mike. I do support the referendum. I think it's important that we do.
Have to talk
I'll talk louder.
Oh, excuse me. I do support the referendum. I think it's important that we put more funds into the school system. Around our county, we have the sales tax in neighboring counties. I think it's foolish for us not to pay it here. When we don't not drive out of town to spend money just because of that sales tax. Others drive into our county and spend their money with retail. And I think that it's important that we get them to help us with our school system. In saying that I support it, I also think that the school board should make sure that the county commissioners continue their funding at the same level or increase, instead of trading off those sales tax funds for funds out of their general budget. Funding schools is a very important issue. It's a very hard issue to tackle, and it takes work in both the county commissioners and the school board to fund a good and adequate school system.
Our next candidate up for Albemarle City Council, District 4, is Mr. Chris Whitley, whose party of affiliation is Republican. Mr. Whitley is a retired banker and currently serves on City Council. Mr. Whitley, if your question is the same, would you like me to repeat it?
No, it's not necessary. I fully support the quarter-cent sales tax as proposed. I served 3 terms on the Board of Education, so I'm kind of pretty familiar with their budget and the financial issues they face. Whether you disagree or agree with the current board on the school structure, whether there should be consolidations or redistricting or whatever, I think those issues should not factor into this. That should be a separate issue. The facts are, we have school buildings open with students in them. We need to do a better job of securing them and controlling who comes on our campuses. It's a very different world from now from when I was in school, or even 5 or 10 years ago. Events have happened, both large and small, that we could never imagine, in places that we would never have expected. Although we can never be 100% secure, we should put forth our best effort. And it's unfortunate that we have to use otherwise scarce resources doing this, but to me, securing our schools is the first priority. Should not be a controversial or a partisan issue. By being so transparent and definite about what these funds will pay for, I think the committee supporting this has a very good chance of getting it passed. The Stanley County Schools website has a very detailed listing by school of what is being done, so that information is available for everyone to see and hopefully follow as the work is being done. I also feel that a sales tax is the most fair way to raise the funds, since it's paid by everyone, not just residents and property owners. In addition, if we're successful in increasing economic activity in Stanley County, the estimated $1.5 million will increase and help fund other systems needs as security needs are met. Every school has significant capital needs every year. And finally, I believe this is an opportunity for the citizens of Stanley County to change some perceptions and to show that we're unified in supporting public education. We may disagree on the details, but overall, we can come together in the end for the most important matters. Thank you.
The second question will be the same for both of you. Mr. Whitley will go first. That question is, adequate low-income housing and shelter for the homeless is frequently a problem for cities. How do you assess the success or failure of Albemarle in this area?
The city of Albemarle addresses the need for low-income housing primarily in our community through the Albemarle Public Housing Department. Their budget is approximately $3 million, which is funded through the Department of Housing and Urban Development instead of through local property taxes. The Housing Department operates 2 physical apartment sites, Amherst Gardens, which is a multifamily site with 150 apartments, and Elizabeth Heights, which has 50 one-bedroom apartments for singles and elderly families. The waiting list for public housing is 294. The Housing Department also provides housing through HUD's Section 8 voucher program. Under this program, the recipients rent from a private landlord, and the Public Housing Department subsidizes the rent payment based on their income, and the payment goes directly to the landlord. The program requires the landlord to allow inspections of the property and to keep it up to a certain standard. The Housing Authority presently has 269 vouchers issued, but no new applications are being taken due to funding from HUD. So currently, the Public Housing Department assists approximately 469 of the very lowest income individuals or families with their housing in our community. In addition to the housing Department also at the 2 sites provides these families and individuals with assistance to improve their situation through classes, various types of classes that are offered through Stanley Community College and other groups. Another thing the city has done to address low-income housing was to contribute to the renovation of the old Central Elementary School by a private company into 1- and 2-bedroom apartments based on age and disability and income. This investment not only put a abandoned historic building back into use, it also provided 50 apartments to our most needy citizens. So the city is doing quite a lot to address low-income housing needs. But one of the best things we can do for those who are in low-income housing is to make sure we have a strong job market so that those who can work can find work. But those who can't work, have limited resources, we should continue to fund the programs that we are. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan, you have the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, sir. In Albemarle, 25%, or about 3,900 people, live below the poverty rate. That's over 10% higher than the state average. The median income in Albemarle is 28% lower than the state average, which makes it so necessary for us to attract new and good-paying jobs. The council needs to determine, along with the Public Housing Authority, what our goal is and what our needs are. I think it's wonderful that Central School has been rehabilitated, but it came at a price. That's a for-profit developer. The City of Albemarle gave them $450,000 for a 30-year loan at 0% interest, which will be forgiven at the end of the loan. The city pays $1,000 a month rent for the auditorium. $150,595 was spent to renovate that auditorium. The budget this year for the Central School auditorium is $31,660, and it generates about $9,800 in property tax. I think that for a for-profit developer, that the city went a little overboard in how it spent the taxpayers' money on renovating the auditorium, as well as contributing to the purchase of the Central School apartments.
Mr. Morgan, you have a third question. The City of Albemarle offers economic development parks and sites. In your opinion, what is the potential for those parks and sites in terms of attracting business and industry?
If we go back and look at economic development for the City of Albemarle, you have to first look back to 2004 when the Prime Power Park was developed up near the airport. 14 years later, it still sits vacant. In 2007, the city council purchased the Wiscasset Mill property. In 2012, they did a study on that property and found that it probably was not ever going to be suitable for industry or for business. Purchase price was $600,000, and since then, they've spent $430,000 on additional studies and on additional demolition, for a total of $1,030,000 on the Wiscasset Mill property. 11 years later, it still sits empty, and the sports complex that we heard so much about is now on hold. The Albemarle Business Center is on a 2-lane road on Highway 52. It was purchased for $1,869,000 last year. It does have gas, but it has no rail, no adequate water, sewer, or electric supply. Since the purchase, $49,589 has been spent on the design and engineering of that project, and the estimated cost is $14,896. The Ingram Park is the latest of the 4 parks that we have started looking at for industrial development. So far, the city has spent $80,000 this year on erosion and control design. Even though they're not paying the Air National Guard for the grading, the estimated value of that service, which comes from taxpayers, is $180,000. When I was a county commissioner, we brought in 10 new industries and hundreds of good-paying jobs. We had no industrial park. I think you have to be smart about what you bring in. You have to be smart about what you go after. And I think I have the experience to bring some good-paying jobs to the people of Albemarle.
Mr. Whitley, you have the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
Economic sites,
Beg your pardon?
economic development sites.
Yeah.
The city owns and is planning on developing The city owns and is planning on developing a 282-acre tract of land on Highway 52 South, the Albemarle Business Center. Property was purchased in 2017 for approximately $1.9 million. The reason for the purchase was that we were not even getting considered by potential businesses due to the lack of industrial sites, and the existing buildings that we had did not meet current modern requirements for these companies. The total development cost of the building, or the park rather, is estimated at $15 million, but will be a multi-year project and will be funded partially through grants and the sale of property. The city has already received a $750,000 grant from the state before construction even begins. The business park will have water, sewer, and electric provided by the city, and will have natural gas available. The park is currently in the design phase and could have as many as 25 parcels, depending on the final design. Once infrastructure is in place over the next year or so, the park will get a lot of attention and exposure from the State Department of Commerce and other organizations. The other sites that are owned by the city that could be potential development sites are the Wiscasset property on Salisbury Avenue, which is intended to be developed as a sports complex. It was bought many years ago, had various study and design work done, but based on the determination that the support is not there yet from the community, it has been put on hold. Previous expenses on the property, the design work, the engineering, the removal of other buildings, or one-time expenses won't be incurred again when this project proceeds. Roosevelt Ingram Park on 2427 has been for sale for many, many years. But since its prime commercial property location, which is becoming more rare over on 2427, this council decided to move more aggressively in marketing that property. Most potential buyers were not considering the property, this is their words, because of the elevation or the height of the property. So we had an arrangement with the Air National Guard. They train with their heavy equipment anyway. So we were able to get them to agree to do some of their training on this site and reduce the grade of the property as low as possible, which will make it much more attractive. Also, a portion of Rock Creek Park has been now leased as an economic development site. Approximately 10 acres is being leased to a company for a treetop challenge course, which will bring in, we'll build zip lines and walkways, and we'll draw visitors from a regional basis. Thank you.
Give these candidates a hand. We're going to take a 5-minute break before the next office comes up.
If we could get everyone to take a seat again, please, we're going to go ahead and resume the schedule. Again, I ask you if you have personal or private conversations to take them outside of the room out of respect for everyone present, and so everyone will be able to hear. Again, thank you so much for being with us this evening for the Stanley County Candidates Forum, and at this time I'm going to resume the schedule and turn it back over to Dr. Ryman.
Our next race is Stanley County Sheriff. We have 2 candidates in that race. Am I on? We have 2 candidates in that race, Mr. Oscar Henson and Mr. Jeff Crisco. If you come forward, I don't know that Mr. Henson is here. He has not indicated he would participate. Our first and only candidate up for Sheriff of Stanley County is Mr. Jeff Crisco, whose party of affiliation is Republican. Mr. Crisco has held numerous police positions in the county over the last 18 years. So I'm going to give you the first of 3 questions. The North Carolina legislature passed the Raise the Age initiative, which raises the age an individual can be tried as an adult from 16 to 18. Will this law have an effect on the rate of recidivism, return to jail, which is currently very high?
Is this on? Okay. The first part of your question pertains to the raise of the age limit. In researching this topic, to include speaking with the district attorney's office here, there currently isn't any verbiage on the specifics of the law because it does pertain to 16 and 17-year-olds. I've been told that it will only apply to specific misdemeanors and felonies, but according to the legislation, they're still writing that law. But now, in regards to the recidivism, I have to be honest. I had to look the definition of that word up. If they would have just told me repeat offenders, I would have been okay. No, you're fine. But according to the National Institute of Justice, within 3 years of release from serving a sentence, 67.8% of offenders were rearrested. And over the 5-year period, that number climbed to 76.6%. Although the Sheriff's Office cannot impose stricter sentences to those who are repeat offenders, we can strengthen our relationship with our District Attorney's Office to see if there are any alternative sentences which may be beneficial or more beneficial in cutting down on repeat offenders. One example for this is we can see if we can get a mandated inpatient treatment facility for substance abuse would be possible instead of a 6-month prison sentence, which would offer little to no intensive addiction treatment, just for the simple fact in 6 months, most of the treatments that are out there that are offered to inmates that are in Department of Corrections, they're longer than 6 months. I would also like for the Sheriff's Office to assist probation and parole in any way possible regarding more activity monitoring those individuals that are most likely to recommit the crimes. Excuse me. In incidences where individuals are out on a bond and have charges pending in court, we have to build relationships again with the judges, the district attorneys, and the magistrates to seek their input in an attempt to find a solution for instances of repeat offenders. I would like to partner with these justice officials to see if we can impose higher bonds for individuals that are out on bond and continue to reoffend in our communities.
Second question is naloxone is frequently touted as a solution to opioid overdose, but its application can have positive and negative results. Please elaborate and state your position on its use.
The pros and cons of what everybody refers to as Narcan. I'll always be the first to admit that I do not have all the answers, and I'm not afraid to ask somebody. And in doing this, I found that I had to address this to an expert. I contacted Jennifer Layton and got her because she's pretty much the expert right now. She's been assisting the county in writing grants to help programs for our county. The opioid crisis in this county is on everyone's mind right now. Stanley County is ranked first in opioid overdoses for the 4th straight month. The North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition has worked closely with the law enforcement agencies to establish best practices and develop recommendations based on this partnership. Some of the pros to Narcan. If it's in law enforcement's hands, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be the first to arrive on the scene. Narcan or naloxone has a shelf life of 18 to 24 months. Naloxone cannot harm someone if an overdose is not the cause of a medical condition. Using naloxone to reverse an overdose is now part of the American Heart Association's CPR training. So it does not require medical training. You don't have to be a nurse or a doctor. Stanley County EMS has been training law enforcement agencies within the county on how to administer naloxone. As of August 31st of this year, 251 North Carolina law enforcement agencies report carrying naloxone. 151 of those agencies have reported reversals or saved lives. Stanley County law enforcement agencies have used naloxone to reverse overdoses prior to EMS's arrival. Unfortunately, I can't give you an exact number right now. Policies and procedures are required to be available or to be able to provide this type of response, which can be developed in partnership with the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. In regards to the cons, there's only truly one con, and that's the expense of it. But I did find out that there are many grants and nonprofit organizations who facilitate the distribution to law enforcement and other emergency management agencies. As a law enforcement officer, we take an oath to serve and protect every life. We should never be the judge nor the jury to those suffering addiction. The opioid epidemic can only be solved through partnership and programs where we address treatment, education, and enforcement. No one of these elements can have a sustained result.
Your third question, recent high-profile cases nationally have involved police and persons with mental disabilities. The results of those interactions sometimes lead to death. Would you suggest special training for your officers in order to deal with these situations? Please indicate why or why not.
Of course, training is paramount. The greatest asset of the sheriff's office is its employees. The employees of the sheriff's office will be encouraged to seek out and get involved in all training and education opportunities. It is imperative that we retain not just veteran deputies, but employees, which is often done through training. Some of you may or may not know that I'm certified through the North Carolina Justice Academy to instruct various topics in the basic law enforcement training. If elected, my appointed Chief Deputy, Ashley Thompson, also an instructor in basic law enforcement training, and is also specialized in areas such as hazmat, bloodborne pathogens, and CPR. We will continue to develop partnerships with Stanley Community College and other resources to provide additional training locally and encourage specialized curriculum. I've been very fortunate in my 26, almost 27 years in law enforcement to receive thousands of hours of training. For me personally, it's not only has broadened my knowledge base in many aspects of law enforcement, but have given me the confidence to do my job to the best of my abilities. I've built my career on the initiative that every day is a training day and there's always something new to learn. This will be encouraged every day regardless of whether you're a new team member or you're a seasoned veteran to the sheriff's office. Building confidence in our team encourages confidence and respect in our community. Thank you.
Let's give Mr. Crisco a hand. You wanna go ahead and take a
We can, if you want to. I'll remind them about the ballots.
Folks, I will remind you that there are sample ballots at the back of the room if anyone has not looked at those and would like to take some with them. We also have copies of the frequently asked questions handout provided by Stanley County government regarding the quarter-cent sales tax referendum. So please make sure you take those and share those as well. Again, I'll remind you that your Stanley County Chamber of Commerce does support the quarter-cent sales tax.
Let's go ahead with the single candidates. We're running a little ahead of time, but well, the next office race is the U.S. House of Representatives District 8. It involves Mr. Richard Hudson, Mr. Frank McNeil. I believe Mr. McNeil is here. Mr. Hudson had a conflict and could not be with us, so you'll come up, Mr. McNeil.
Where do you want? Up on the hot seat there. All right.
You got a camera on you.
Ready.
Our first candidate for U.S. House, and only candidate for U.S. House of Representatives District 8 tonight is Mr. Frank McNeil, whose party of affiliation is Democrat. Mr. McNeil is currently president of Neal Oil Company. Mr. McNeil, the first question. Recently, tariffs have been imposed on goods imported into the United States. Trading partners have reciprocated. What is your position on this action, and what impact do you think the action will have on businesses in Stanley County?
I don't think it was a good idea to begin a tariff war. My basic philosophy is that free enterprise and free markets is really the way to do business. Since the tariffs came on, commodity prices, cotton's gone down, 13%. Corn's down 15% and soybeans are down 18%. And of course, as you well know, your cost of production is here no matter what the sell price is. And so when the prices go down 15%, that doesn't mean you lose 15% of your profit. You lose a big chunk of your profit. And that can really be tough on the farmers. In my business, we're propane distributors. Steel tanks are an important part of our business. The cost of storage tanks has gone up 28% to us since the first of the year. You know, Newton's third law of physics says that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And of course, I think that's what we're seeing. You put a tariff on to try to help an industry over here, and maybe it helps a few jobs there, but then it's going to have an adverse effect over here when retaliation takes place. And it most definitely will take place. So, like I say, I think free enterprise and free markets are a much more desirable way to go. Thank you.
There's a bill in the House that's called Restore Our Parks and Public Lands Act. It has bipartisan support. The bill would set aside 1/2 of federal income from energy production on federal lands and offshore production and devote it to deferred maintenance of federal parks and lands. Are you in favor of this bill, and why or why not?
I am in favor of it. As you mentioned, it does have very strong bipartisan support. And the purpose is to try to work on the backlog of maintenance that needs to be done all across the country at national parks and national forests. To me, our forest and our national parks are one of the most incredible treasures that we as citizens have here in the country. And so we certainly need to maintain them. My understanding, the bill allocates about 5% to the Bureau of Land Management that looks after the national forest. I would prefer that there be a bigger portion going to the national forest, like the Uwharrie right next door to us here, but I think it's an excellent bill. It is being funded by revenues that are coming into the federal government for energy development on public lands. So I think it's a great use of the money. I'll certainly support it.
Thank you. The third question, this might be a little difficult. The current administration recently withdrew from the Paris Agreement, the Climate Agreement Pact, arguing it would stifle businesses and jobs. The most recent UN report issued by foremost climate scientists from 40 countries found we must eliminate the use of fossil fuels in the next decade or two in order to prevent the Earth reaching temperatures that will cause dire consequences. Where do you stand on this issue and why?
Well, the Paris Accords, the Climate Accords, did not force us to meet certain standards. It was a voluntary effort by countries from all across the world, and each country picked the targets that they were going to try to obtain, that they were going to shoot for. And if we don't meet those targets, there was no penalty. It was just maybe we were embarrassed because we didn't do as well as some of our fellow countries around the world did. As you mentioned, 99% of the most renowned climatologists around the world say that climate change is happening and that mankind is contributing to it. You know, I was always told that when you borrow something, you return it in better shape than when you borrowed it. You know, we are borrowing the use of the world while we live here, the use of the earth while we live our lives. I think it's imperative that we pass it along in better shape to our children and our grandchildren than we found it in. After all, if you remember, President Reagan said, conservatives conserve. Thank you.
Give Mr. McNeil a hand.
Could I have 20 more seconds to make a closing? I didn't say it at the beginning, but thank all of you guys, men and women, for showing up out here. We candidates go to forums like this all the time. Normally, there are more candidates than there are audience. I just commend you. What an incredible turnout, and it's wonderful to see so many people. Thank you.
We're going to take a break for about 10 minutes.
Thank you again for being here, and we'll go ahead and resume the schedule.
The next race is the North Carolina Senate District 33 race. Mr. Carl Ford and Mr. Aaron Wilhelm. So, Mr. Ford, you'll be first one up. So he's our first candidate for the U.S. or for North Carolina Senate District 33, and his party affiliation is Republican. Mr. Ford is serving his third term in the North Carolina House and is a former Rowan County commissioner. Your question, Mr. Ford, is the legislature has been increasing teacher salaries over the past few years. Teachers have lobbied that the increases are not coming fast enough, and that North Carolina teacher salaries rank 37th among states. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, like you just mentioned, we have raised teacher salaries 5 years in a row. They continue to go up, and our educational spending has gone to 57% of the state budget, and it increases every year. And we're continuing to do well with teachers and to do well with schools in general and to spend more money. And I think it's been very important. We met with teachers and superintendents from all across the state, and the first thing they told us to do was we needed to increase teacher pay in the first 5 years because that's where we were losing teachers, and that was taken care of. And then we come across the board and got everybody raises, and now the average teacher pay is getting right at $53,000 a year. It's about $52,600 per year is the average teacher pay in North Carolina. And so we have moved up the ladder, and it continues to move up into the 20s and moving higher. And average teacher pay is something you've got to look at. I've got a friend that teaches in New Jersey, and he makes $75,000 a year, but he's thinking about moving here to teach with the pay cut, and because the cost of living is so much lower here. So when you're looking at average teacher pay, you've got to consider the state, the county. You've got to consider a lot of things, the part of the country. So I'm for more teacher raises, obviously, and they're going to come every year. They have the last 5 years. Now, have they been enough? Well, maybe it was a little slow at first. But you got to remember there was a year there a few years ago where the teacher pay was actually cut. So when the other party was in control, teacher pay was cut and frozen for a couple of years. Now it's been increased 5 years in a row, and we'll continue to do more of that in Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Our next candidate up for the North Carolina Senate District 33 is Mr. Aaron Wilhelm, whose party of affiliation is Democrat. Mr. Wilhelm is a community engagement specialist with Cardinal Innovations and is a former Granite Quarry Alderman. Mr. Wilhelm, your question is the same. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, thank you. One of my top priorities would be to improve our education system. It's my belief that educators hold the most important job in our country. They're responsible for the education and the future of our nation and our state, and they should be respected and compensated as such. I commend the General Assembly for raising teacher salaries, but I believe that we need to raise them far higher. I'll tell you a story. My son, when he was in first grade, which was 2 years ago, my youngest, 2 months into his first grade year, his teacher resigned and took a job at a school in a different state because of an increase in pay. He went with a substitute teacher for about 2 months, well, different substitute teachers for about 2 months, and finally got a permanent teacher almost halfway through his school year. So I think that we really need to, we're kind of chasing the national average, but do we want to be average? North Carolina, we've worked real hard in the past to improve our education, and I think we should continue to do so. And I think to do so, we need to hire the best. And in order to do that, we need to pay well and have an attractive market for them. So, thank you.
Mr. Wilhelm, this question's for you first, and Mr. Ford, you'll get the same question following. There is a constitutional amendment on the November ballot which changes how judicial vacancies are filled. Those in favor say governors have too few restraints on their ability to pick judges, and sometimes they put political cronies on the bench. They say the change would reduce political considerations in choosing judges and improve the quality of the judiciary. Opponents say the measure is yet another step to transfer power from the governor to the legislature. They say the process would still be political and would require candidates to lobby legislators whose laws they would have to one day rule on. Where do you stand on this issue?
Thank you. I stand against the amendment, and I'll tell you why. There's a separation of powers, and I believe that by moving the appointment of the judicial vacancies to the legislature, that takes away from the governor's powers, which were originally created to create that separation of powers. That's my main reason against it. Also, that all 5 of our living governors stood up against it as well. So, thank you.
Mr. Ford, would you like me to read the question again?
No, you're fine. I'm obviously for the amendment, and what the problem is the governor gets to appoint. Now, right now, if a county commissioner or a state representative passes away or resigns, then the local executive committee of whichever party comes together and replaces with someone from the same party. Right now, if there's a Republican governor and 20 Democrats pass away in 2 years, he can replace them with all Republican judges, and vice versa. That doesn't seem to be the right way to go. You should go with the party that the people voted for to elect into that judicial office. So that's the way it needs to be. Is it needs to be based on how the other elected offices are, and also get us more in line with the federal guidelines. And what this does is you had a lot of these powers stripped away from the legislature when Governor Hunt was in office. And he talked his own party into giving up a lot of powers in the legislature at that time. It's just fact. And what this does is sort of balance it out and puts it back in the hands of the people, where the governor's up statewide every 4 years, your elected representatives and senators are up for election every 2 years. So if you don't like the decisions they make, you can get them out of office pretty quickly, as opposed to a governor running statewide. And plus, it puts more of the power in the hands of the people, not just with the judges that they've elected and they've appointed to represent them, but with those elected officials. They'll be making a list and giving that list to the governor and say, here's a list of 5 to choose from, and it'll be from the same party of which the person that resigned or passed away or aged out. So I think it's the way to go. It puts more power back into the hands of the people.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. This question is for you. This is your third and final question. In the last biennium of the North Carolina General Assembly, 1,922 bills were filed. Legislatures have been known to say that there is no way to read and understand all the bills that are filed. In your opinion, is there a better way for the legislature to conduct business?
There probably is a better way. What happened is because of compromise with both parties, Republican, Democrat, everyone was allowed to file up to 15 bills. I honestly think we need to go back to 10 bills. I had a gentleman say one time, if you get one good bill out of here in a day, you've done something good. But everybody with 10 good ideas, I doubt it. A lot of people just file bills for political reasons, and I understand that. It's a fact of life. It's been going on since day one. It'll be going on day last. But you could probably cut it back like that. And of those thousands of bills, you'll have multiplied thousands of votes on each bill. But with that being said, there are so many checks and balances in place that a bill is introduced and then it goes to a committee or 2 or 3 committees and then is voted on those committees. Then it comes back to the House floor and is voted on up or down. If it passes, then it goes to the Senate and the process starts all over again. Checks and balances where it goes to several committees and then to the floor for a vote. And if it passes up, then it's sent on to the governor. However, if there are changes made, then it has to come back to the House for concurrence. And it could live or die there. So I think the checks and balances that are in place are good for the people of North Carolina. And there are only slight improvements that can maybe be made, and that's probably cutting back those number of bills that we can file. And some of the folks that are here, Representative Goodman and others, know that at one time it was 10. Now it's up to 15. So I probably think we should go back down to that. And that's not including local bills, which there are many more.
Mr. Wilhelm, your questions are different. There's a constitutional amendment on the November ballot which will strengthen protections for victims of crime, establish certain absolute basic rights for victims, and ensure the enforcement of these rights. It has bipartisan support, but opponents say it will be expensive, perhaps $30 million annually, difficult to implement, will slow down court proceedings, and that protections are already in place. Are you in favor of this amendment, and why not?
Thank you. I'm actually against this amendment, and mainly because it's also called Marsy's Law. It's in the title. It's a law. It doesn't say Marsy's Amendment. And for those reasons that you just stated, that it might cost $30 million annually, that it would be difficult to implement. Well, the General Assembly, it does have does have nonpartisan support for it. So pass it as a law. Let's see how it works, work out some kinks and things like that is what I say. One question that I'm going to use some of my time for that we didn't receive, though, is the opioid crisis that is wreaking havoc here in Stanley County. I have experience working in that field. I work in mental health, I work in substance use. I have built relationships in this county for 6 years to work on that. And so I just want to make sure that everyone here knows that that is one of my top priorities. Thank you.
Let's give the candidates a hand. we're going to just be a few minutes, not long. If we get all the candidates in the House, then we'll move ahead and run on schedule and won't be stopping, starting. But right now, all the candidates are not here, so. Is Mr. Justin Miller here? Mr. Justin Miller? All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next race, which is the North Carolina House of Representatives, District 66. The candidates are Mr. Ken Goodman, Mr. Justin Miller, and Mr. Joey Davis. And I don't believe Mr. Miller is here, although he indicated he would participate. Our first candidate up for North Carolina House of Representatives, District 66, is Mr. Ken Goodman, whose party of affiliation is Democrat. Mr. Goodman is serving his 4th term in the House. Mr. Goodman, both of you gentlemen will receive the same question. But the question is, North Carolina currently has $50 billion of unfunded retirement and health care costs. The legislature recently passed the Unfunded Liability Solvency Reserve Act, which sets up an employee benefit trust fund to be funded through appropriations from the General Assembly. Any overflows or statutory excesses from the rainy day fund or savings from the refinancing of general obligation bonds or special indebtedness. Do you feel that this action will be sufficient to solve the problem?
Thank you. Well, before I start, I want to thank the Stanley County Chamber for having us here tonight. It's a great event, and it's good to see so many people here interested in public policy. So thank you very much for doing that. I don't know if it will be sufficient, but it will be the only bill like this in the country. And North Carolina has traditionally been a very fiscally responsible state, and this is just an example of North Carolina leading the nation in dealing with unfunded mandates. If you go to a lot of northern states, their retirement programs or health insurance programs are drastically underfunded, and they're not doing anything about it. And the people who are entitled to these things, who worked all their lives to receive these benefits, have a right to know that they're going to be there. And North Carolina took a great step to do this, and I voted for it. I'm very proud that I did. And I think that we will continue to improve these funds as we go forward in the future.
Thank you. Our next candidate up for the North Carolina House of Representatives, District 66, is Mr. Joey Davis, whose party of affiliation is Republican. Mr. Davis is in sales and has worked as a consultant on several Republican campaigns. Mr. Davis, you got the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, thank you. I'm good. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I think that this particular bill is a good first step. I work as a salesperson with a Chevrolet dealership. One of the things that caused the GM bankruptcy and the Chrysler bankruptcy was the rising cost of health care and pension benefits to our former employees. This is a good first step. A lot of states have gone bankrupt, and we are making progress towards making sure that doesn't happen to North Carolina. I commend Ken for voting for that bill, and I would support it as well.
Mr. Davis, you have the this question will be the same for both of you gentlemen. There's a constitutional amendment on the November ballot that establishes an 8-member bipartisan Board of Ethics and Election Enforcement in the Constitution to administer ethics and election law. Supporters say the governor has too much power over the electoral process, and dividing the board's membership equally between the parties would require the board to come up with bipartisan decisions. Opponents say the change is another power grab by the legislature, will leave the board hopelessly deadlocked, and cuts out unaffiliated voters. The result, they say, would be weaker enforcement of election and ethics law. Where do you stand on this amendment?
I am opposed to this amendment. I believe we have elections. I would actually prefer to see a 9-person board where we had 3 Republicans, 3 unaffiliateds, and 3 Democrats. We have statewide elections. We have them for a reason. If you win elections, then you get to make the decisions. Unfortunately, in my opinion, in the 2016 elections, the state of North Carolina elected a Democrat, and that gave him power over the Board of Elections. So be it. Hopefully in 2020, we will remedy that and elect a Republican, and the Republicans will have control of that board. But again, I would prefer to see a 3-3-3 board, because I think right now the second largest party in the state of North Carolina is actually the nonpartisan and affiliated. So I do believe they deserve a voice. Thank you.
Mr. Goodman, you have the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No. This amendment is just another step in the legislature's attempt to strip the governor of all the power that he has in this state. Before any of these things came up, North Carolina had the 5th weakest governor in the country, and then as soon as Governor Cooper got elected, the legislature started requiring that all his appointments, his cabinet appointments, be confirmed by the Senate. Never been done in the past. They reduced his appointive power from 1,500 appointments to 300 appointments. The judicial vacancy amendment is a place where they're taking power from the governor, along with this move with the Board of Elections. We've had this system for a long, long time, and it's worked very well in this state. There's no good reason to do it. The state needs a strong executive. If you don't have that, you just don't have a good system of checks and balances in the state. And there should be 3 strong branches of government. Seems to me the General Assembly wants 1, and we don't need to let this happen. And we will have a Republican governor at some point, and you know, they may rue the day that they've done this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. This is your 3rd question. You each will have a different question. The Build North Carolina Bond Act was recently passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor. The law authorizes the issuance of up to $300 million annually through 2028. That's the issuance of $300 million worth of bonds. And DOT can use the money to maintain a robust construction schedule, and the money would be paid, the money to pay it back would be paid through the Highway Trust Fund. In your opinion, is this the best way to fund needed road projects?
I think it's an excellent way to do this. I was a co-sponsor of this bill, and what it really does, it just speeds up road projects that are already on the books to be done, and it just leverages money that we're going to get in the future and allows those projects to be done now when interest rates are low and when there's just a really serious need for transportation. I'm on the Transportation Committee in the House, and over the next 20 years, our transportation needs are underfunded by about $40 billion. So this won't solve the problem, but it'll certainly help a lot. North Carolina is a rapidly growing state, one of the fastest growing states in the country. And if we're going to continue to grow and provide a good quality of life for the people that come here, we have to have good transportation, and this is a very good method to do that, and I'm very pleased that this passed.
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. Mr. Davis, in 2012, the General Assembly passed a bill that ordered coastal agencies to ignore up-to-date scientific coastal data and use historical data which predicted lower levels of sea rise. It was an attempt to aid developers along the coast. Given the recent hurricanes and other weather events, did this bill cause harm to coastal communities as they plan for the future?
I don't think so. Basically, the bill left the enforcement actions up to the local communities, and the local communities could do as they wished with their building projects. I don't think you can predict hurricanes. I don't think that you can control the weather. And I don't think that long-term we know what the weather's going to do. I don't think that really any of the data is relevant in such a short amount of time. Climate cycles typically go in about 1,100-year cycles. We have about 150 years of real temperature data. We are about 450 years out of the little ice age. The temperature should be rising right now. Probably in 75 to 100 years, it should start declining. We've really not seen a temperature level rise compared to the greenhouse gas emissions as they projected. And I think it's fiscally irresponsible to make economic policy based on information that you don't know.
Thank you. Let's give these candidates a hand, please. We still have some candidates that aren't here that are coming up later, so it's hard for us to move ahead. We're going to go ahead with this next group. This is the North Carolina House of Representatives, District 67. Candidates in this race are Mr. Michael Finn, Mr. Wayne Sasser, and Ms. Karen Webster. Mr. Finn had indicated he could not be here tonight. So I'm going to start with Mr. Sasser. I assume Mr. Finn is not in the audience, right? I want to make sure I give everybody a chance. Our first candidate up is Mr. Wayne Sasser, whose party of affiliation is Republican. Mr. Sasser is a farmer and a retired pharmacist. Mr. Sasser, the first question comes to you, and Ms. Webster, you'll get the same question later. The legislature has been lessening EPA rules, i.e. deregulating, in order to provide a more favorable position for businesses. Opponents have argued that with the changing climate, our problems hog lagoons and coal ash ponds and fluorocarbon pollution, we should not deregulate. Where do you stand on this issue?
When, excuse me, when President Trump was elected, one of the promises he made when he was running, that he was going to reduce big government by 30%. And he has acted on those promises in a lot of ways. The reduction and reduction of the EPA has affected North Carolina drastically, not only in jobs where a lot of people at the Research Triangle were EPA employees that enforce the EPA laws, but it also has affected North Carolina in a lot of clean air projects. You mentioned the coal overflow and pollution, and so there's a give and take with everything. Nobody wants big government because we have to pay for it, but we also deserve clean air and as little pollution as we can, because that's what we're going to leave our children. It probably won't affect us in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, but the next 50 or 100 years it will affect. So that's kind of where I stand on that issue. I think it had an enormous effect on the state of North Carolina, and a lot of it was negative.
Our next candidate up is Miss Karen Webster, whose party of affiliation is Democrat. Ms. Webster works as a CPA. You have the same question, Ms. Webster. Would you like me to read it again?
No, thank you. I think anybody with a lick of common sense can see that a lot of this regulation has gotten ridiculous. Something that started out as something good, it can be drilled down on a little bit too much. Now, that being said, I appreciate environmental regulation. I appreciate the EPA, and I think we're too quick to rush and say job-killing regulation when it can also be job-creating. We need people to come up with guidelines. We need people to enforce guidelines. We need people to adjudicate the guidelines. So it's not necessarily a net job loss every time we have EPA regulations. And we need clean water. We need to know what's in the water. We need to have consistent standards to know that our water is safe to drink and to know that our air is safe to breathe. So I hesitate to just, willy-nilly say, well, let's cut a third of the EPA. But let's absolutely take a common sense approach to the regulation that's come to pass and make sure that it's doing the job and necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. This question for you, Ms. Webster, and it will be the same question to you, Mr. Sasser. In 2017, the legislature made Superior and District Court election partisan. Judicial candidates must solicit their party affiliation and participate in primaries after they had been made nonpartisan in 1996 and 2001. This action was taken in the belief that it would better inform the voters. The governor who vetoed the bill said judges should be elected based on their experience and ability, not their political party. He said candidates who register unaffiliated to avoid partisan labels have a harder time getting on the ballot because they must attain signatures from at least 2% of the voters in their election districts. What is your opinion of this bill that is now law?
Well, I think it was absolutely a step in the wrong direction. The number one person that I want to be unbiased is a judge. I don't want to know that they've had to espouse political beliefs to advance their career. I want them to know. I want to know that I have a judge who is impartial and unbiased and comes to the job with experience, with judgment, with discernment, and not coming out of the gate out of law school knowing, well, I have to position myself as a Republican in this county or a Democrat in that county. That's not good for anyone. A lot of what's wrong right now has been brought by partisanship. So the last thing we need is more partisanship, and the last place we need it is in the judiciary. So I'm definitely against it.
And you, Mr. Sasser?
Okay, thank you. The election of judges is the hardest election of any individual trying to get elected. Doesn't make any difference if it's district judge, superior judge, where it's North Carolina State Supreme Court judge, or where it's a North Carolina Court of Appeals judge. The reason is it's hard on the person running for the office, but it's also hard on the electorate that's trying to vote for those people. Main reason is they don't raise a lot of money, because if you're out raising a lot of money, then everybody's going to say, well, you're obligated to, rule in their favor, so on and so forth. And it's also that they run on statewide races a lot of times, and they're just not known. So therefore, they get elected because they got a good name like Hunt or Honeycutt or whatever. So what this does is it helps the judges with telling the voter who, if everybody would do their due diligence and spend 2 hours seeing who all those judges were, then things would be perfect. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a reality world. And the reality is people do not study who the judges are. They go in to vote and they guess and they pick and choose on bad information. So is this a perfect situation? No. Is it better than no guidance at all? Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sasser, these last two questions will be different. So you have the first one, Mr. Sasser. There's a constitutional amendment on the November ballot that reduces the income tax rate in North Carolina to a maximum allowable rate of 7%. The limit now in the Constitution is 10%. Do you favor this amendment, and why or why not?
I do favor the amendment. The present tax rate, individual tax rate, is 5.25%. It has been as high as 7%. With the booming economy that we have in North Carolina, with the growth that we have in North Carolina, the good job that our state is doing to bring industry to all parts of North Carolina, not just to Raleigh and Charlotte and Greensboro, but to even rural North Carolina, then we have a booming economy. We have somewhere between 300 and 500,000 people a year moving to North Carolina that stimulates that economy. We want to encourage people to move here. We want them to keep money in their pockets. We want them to spend it and continue to stimulate our economy, and I definitely support this amendment.
Thank you. Ms. Webster, this question. There's a constitutional amendment on the November ballot that requires voter ID for North Carolina voters. At this point, the ID has not been defined by the legislature. Are you in favor of this amendment? If not, why? And if so, under what condition?
Just precisely as you said, it has not been codified by the amendment, which is largely my biggest problem with it. We're talking about something like voter ID. It would not be difficult to say what you mean by that. It would have been easy to say valid North Carolina driver's license. So to me, that's a red flag. That was a no-brainer. That's what you need to rent a car. That's what people keep talking about. So why, when most of us are sitting here with valid North Carolina driver's license, was that not stipulated in the amendment? So that does set my antenna up a little bit, like, well, that would be easy to say. What is it that you're going to surprise us with? This is not a blank check that I'm going to sign. I want to know what it is. If you've tried to get a driver's license in the last 6 months, you know what it's like at the DMV and what's happened with the requirement to have a real ID. Whether you're familiar with it or not, women especially, me, and everyone who's gotten married, you need to drum up your marriage license. You need to show why you were born Eilers and you were married and became a Webster. It's a lot of stuff to drag down to the DMV, and that's just to pick up the real ID that we need. So what is this new voter ID going to require when it would have been easy to say a driver's license and they didn't? So if it's going to be even more onerous than a real ID, I don't know how we're going to get around that. I waited 5 hours at the DMV to do my license in September. 5 hours. I'm lucky that I have a flexible schedule and I was able to do it. So it would be easy to specify and they haven't. So I am against the voter ID amendment as written.
Let's give these candidates a hand.
Folks, we're going to take about a 15-minute break and see if we can confirm if the remainder of the candidates are going to be with us tonight. We know part of them are here, part of them are not, and we'll follow back up shortly. Thank you.
I thank everybody for your patience. The last three groups have all agreed that we can move up the schedule, so we're going to begin and take them in the order they're in, but we'll move the schedule up because it's clear that we got more time than we need. And I apologize that when we ran the pork and politics in the spring, people didn't have enough time. And tonight, everybody seems to have more time than they need. So I apologize for that. Kathy, are they ready? All right. The next race up is the Stanley County Board of Commissioners, District 4. Mr. Mike Lambert and Mr. Zach Almond. If you guys would come up and take a seat.
All right.
Some of you have come in later, so I'll explain the process once again. You'll receive 3 questions. The first 2 questions will be the same for both of you. We'll go in order. The first question will go in the order you're on the ballot, and then we'll reverse the order, coming back the other way. So the first candidate up for Stanley County Board of Commissioners, District 4, is Mr. Mike Lambert, whose party of affiliation is Democrat. Mr. Lambert is a former Director of Public Works for the City of Albemarle. Mr. Lambert, question is this, and it'll be the same for you, Zach. The voters of Stanley County are being offered a chance to pass 1/4 of a penny sales tax, which will benefit our public schools. The Board of Education and County Commissioners both have come out in support, as well as several town councils. Do you support this referendum, and why or why not?
First of all, thank you for the Chamber for putting this event on. I appreciate the fact that we can come here and not just talk about politics, but have an opportunity to tell a little bit about ourselves and what we've done and what we want to do in the future. The last few months, I've actually traveled around to the cities and the towns and the village in Stanley County. And time and time again, I saw each one of those communities vote to support the quarter-inch sales tax. And the main reason I think they are doing that is because we have saw a need to generate $1.5 million in revenue by placing a quarter cent on our sales that will be shared by everyone who makes purchases in Stanley County. I personally own real estate property, and I would rather see that type of tax than real estate increase in real estate tax. The school system has been educating the community on what can be done for that money. And one thing I see that there's two things that the student needs to be able to move on with their life and provide a good education. One, they need to make sure that they are not hungry, and they need to feel safe. And if this can help do that, then we can open an opportunity for our children to further their education. And also, it allows the teachers to have a better teaching environment. Things were different a few years ago. Now we're moving into an area where safety is a big concern for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate up for Stanley County Board of Commissioners, District 4, is Mr. Zach Allman. Mr. Allman works locally and previously served as chairman of the North Carolina Federation of College Republicans. Mr. Allman, you have the same question. Would you like me to repeat it, or?
No, sir. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the chamber for putting this forum on, and I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I've been an outspoken advocate for the quarter-cent sales referendum because of its intended purpose. I'm part of a committee, the Stanley County Citizens for Safer Schools, and I'm in agreement with both the superintendent, Dr. James, and with the entire county commission and the school board that we need a quarter-cent sales tax referendum to pass, simply because we need that revenue to be used to improve our student safety. I've spoken to about 5 town councils throughout the county asking for their endorsement of the referendum. Tonight, I'll also ask all of you who are here to please support the referendum on November 6th or by early voting. The quarter-cent sales tax is the most fair form of taxation, and I think it is a common sense solution to generating much needed income to increase the safety of our local public schools. The referendum is confusing to many voters, and I ask that you please look extensively into the referendum's specific objectives and what all could be done with the projected $1.5 million that the revenue would bring into the county. It would bring a lot safer environment to our schools, and I do hope the board will use the funds as intended. And if elected to the county commission, I do pledge to see that if the referendum is passed, to make sure that there's no sunset on the referendum and that the funds will be used for their intended purpose, which is to improve school safety. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The second question is, and it will be the same for both of you, that Mr. Allman, you will answer first. What are some potential areas of opportunity for Stanley County economic development?
I think 2 major potential areas of opportunity for Stanley County economic development is first the widening of both Highway 49, which is bringing us closer to Charlotte in respect to travel time, and mostly impacting the northern end of our county, and the widening of 2427, which is doing the same. And I also think that if our schools improve, which I do believe there's a strong effort to do so, there'll be a positive economic impact. And improving our schools, we need to put an emphasis on career and technical education. I think there's a shortage of mechanics here, and carpenters and plumbers and electricians in our community. And in today's economy, they're making just as much as someone with a 4-year degree. Again, I do think broadband can have a big impact on our county when it pertains to recruiting both large companies and small businesses. We have a great asset in our county and our community college, and I think we need to take advantage of it when recruiting businesses. The new 44 manufacturing jobs at Inforge, I think that's positive for our community. I also think we have a big opportunity at the Baden Business Park. There's a lot of unused space there, and it could be used for a variety of manufacturing jobs or something similar to what's at ERI currently. The Foxville and Northern Railroad Company opening the railroad line back into Baden could spur more business in the Baden Business Park, which would obviously result in more jobs. Government is not in the job of making business. Our commission simply needs to create a business-friendly atmosphere where entrepreneurs and business owners can succeed.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good, thank you. Stanley County is in such an excellent position for future growth. Our western edge of our county is 15 minutes from 485. Our northern end, the northwest end, is within 20 minutes of the Concord, Kannapolis area. And these are some of the largest growing locations in not just North Carolina, but the United States. And to our east, we have the lakes and the parks and the Uwharrie Mountains, which brings a good quality of life for our community. I know that there are operations in place right now where Stanley County has, in the process of building an industrial park in the western end of the county. The city of Albemarle has purchased property here in Albemarle for an industrial park, and also Pfeiffer University has already got loans approved to move downtown Albemarle. We need to be ready when this happens. We need to have our workforce ready because it's going to happen, and I appreciate the fact to be able to express that. Thank you.
These last two questions will be different, and Mr. Lambert will go first. Projections show Stanley County gradually increasing in population, but that the population will be older. What opportunities and challenges will this present to the county?
The most projected dates of population is around 61,000 for Stanley County. We have a 20% that are 65 and older. 65 and older today is very active. We have a good community that offers a good quality of life for those active 65 and older community. We have the lakes, we have the parks, and we also have running trails, things that active seniors, individuals need to do. And on the county level, we have our senior center that is currently in operation of expanding to the western end of the county to offer 2 locations for our seniors. Along with that and good health care, we're going to be able to utilize these 65 and older because right now they're staying in the workforce. Some of them are retiring and taking second jobs, or they're taking care of their grandchildren, but they're very active, and we need, as county commissioners, we need to be available to make sure that we provide the services and resources available. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Almond, this is your third question. Stanley County leads all counties in opioid overdoses. What do you see as possible solutions to this difficult problem?
Everyone here knows someone or has seen the negative impact that the opioid crisis has had on our community, specifically in the last 2 years. Stanley County statistics this past summer were astonishing in comparison to other counties in the Narcan use. And I realize the negative impact the opioid crisis has on our community, and how it's had a negative impact on our crime ratings, and how it bogs down our court system with repeat drug offenders. I've spoken with Darrell Oliver of Safer Communities Ministries on several occasions, and this past April, Mr. Oliver invited myself and a friend to an event he hosted at First Baptist Indian Trail down in Union County. And I was very impressed by his faith-based organization, which seeks to assist those in addiction recovery. His program has been extremely effective in Union County and has saved the taxpayers over $1 million over the past 2 years, according to District Attorney Trey Robinson down there. That being said, I'll do everything I can as a commissioner to help Darrell and Safer Communities Ministries get started in Stanley County. Also, earlier last month, Wayne Sasser invited me to tour Bridge to Recovery, and we met with Director Lou Davis, and I learned a lot that day, and I saw up close how dire and some of those situations those folks are in, and the struggles those who head up the programs have. And I admire the passion and vigor those counselors had working with those folks. And this program's a faith-based detox And the recovery, I think those recovery systems are the best kinds we have. And I think the key to a successful program is the follow-up, and that's something that he's working on. And I think it's important that we keep these individuals engaged and on the right path on their trek to recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Allman. Let's give these candidates a hand. Our next race is the Stanley County Board of Commissioners at large. Candidates for this race are Mr. Lane Furr and Dr. Lane Coates. Mr. Furr is ill. We just called him and cannot participate. So Dr. Coates, if you'll come up, you've got the floor. Dr. Coates' party of affiliation is Democrat, and Dr. Coates is a pediatrician. So your first question, the voters of Stanley County are being offered a chance to pass a 1/4 of a penny sales tax that will benefit our public school. The Board of Education and County Commissioners both have come out in support, as well as several town councils. Do you support this referendum, and why not?
I do support the 1/4-cent sales tax referendum. The reason that I do is because our schools are in dire need of updates and safety improvements for our children, but they're also in need of books, computers, other things, and hopefully the 1/4-cent sales tax can free up some funds so that we can stay up to date with education and provide more support for the teachers and in the classrooms by having the 1/4-cent sales tax take away that need from the current budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Your second question is, what do you see as the primary inhibitors to Stanley County economic development?
Well, there are several things that are one is we don't have any huge major highways connecting us to the larger metropolitan areas. We are further away from airports that a lot of people and industries are looking for. Our aging population, in North Carolina, 34% of people are over 60. And in our county, it's closer, well, it's 37. In our county, it's 44% are over 60. That doesn't, we don't have a young population to work. So we need to, we need an educated young population to be a workforce for new industry. The things that are in favor are our natural resources, our beautiful landscape, and our current people, the people who live here who are willing to work hard for the community and are dedicated. So we have a lot more going for us than against us, and we need to support the things that are here, like education, so that our school systems can attract more business people to the community. We need people who live here and not just drive in to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Your last question, Charlotte has found upward mobility for citizens of poverty to be difficult. Is this something this county should address? And if so, how might it be addressed?
Well, I truly think that is something that we need to address. The state poverty level is 14%, and in Stanley County, it's 17%. And poverty is a family of 4 living on $24,000 a year. A single person living on about $12,000 a year. Can you imagine trying to do that and support your kids and try to give them an opportunity for a future? And I see those kids. Those are the kids that I see every day. In my time here, I've seen our payer mix go from 35% Medicaid to 65% Medicaid. Now, that's nobody's fault, except our economy has changed, the jobs have changed, the young people don't have jobs. So we've got to improve things so that people have jobs. One of the biggest ways for people to get ahead is to have a proper education, and that has to start young. We have to have kids who are in pre-K. We have to have our children who are able to read by grade 4. If they're not able to read by the 4th grade, they are not likely to graduate from high school. Education is the biggest equalizer. Privatizing education leaves many of the needy in our population at risk for not being successful. So we have to support our public schools and try to get education started much earlier. Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Coates a hand. And our final event tonight is the Stanley County Board of Education at-large seat. Candidates are Mr. Anthony Graves and Ms. Joanne Hesley. If you'll please take a seat. The first candidate up for Stanley County Board of Education at-large seat is Mr. Anthony Graves, whose party affiliation is Republican. Mr. Graves is a technology entrepreneur and advisor. This question will be the same for both of you, and you get it first, Mr. Graves. The voters of Stanley County are being offered a chance. In case you're wondering, I've asked this question many times. We asked the public for questions. And this question came in, and I think we had 3 other questions, but this one came in maybe 15, 16, 17 times. So this is on everybody's mind, and so we're addressing it. It's not that we couldn't think of questions, it's just that people think it's important. So the voters of Stanley County are being offered a chance to pass a quarter-of-a-penny sales tax that will benefit our public school. You're on record as supporting this referendum. How do you see this benefiting our community and schools?
Thank you. And I do want to thank the Chamber for having this event, and I apologize for not being able to make it during the primary. I'm sorry I missed that. Well, I think that probably everyone here is in agreement and unanimous in supporting the quarter-cent sales tax. One of the reasons why, and I spoke about this over at the E. Waddell Center about a week ago, one of the reasons why we had difficulty getting this passed previously after several attempts was people in the community were confused about where the money was going to go. We have settled that. The commissioners and the Board of Education and the administration have gotten together And if you go to stanleycountyschools.org, you can actually, under the resources section, you can see specific items that they have outlined for each school, starting with the elementary schools all the way up through the high schools, that are specifically earmarked for safety, including additional cameras. There's something called a safety vestibule. And then there are also software programs used for student and visitor tracking. And as some of the other speakers tonight have said, this sales tax, which is equitable, meaning that not only will all of us in this room, whether or not we're property owners, going to contribute to this, but people who are visiting us from out of town, from Michigan or South Carolina or Florida or California, will all be contributing to safety in Stanley County schools. The thing that I like about this as well is that this doesn't have to come out of the regular school funding. It's additional funding specifically earmarked for safety. And I know that they have a 2 to 3 year plan that they'd like to implement with that money. And then beyond that, I know that they've also talked about using the money to support additional school resource officers and things like that. So I fully support the 1/4 cent sales tax, and I think it's going to pass this time around.
Thank you. The next candidate up is Ms. Joanne Hesley, whose party of affiliation is Democrat. Ms. Hesley is a retired teacher and currently works as a substitute teacher. Would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
That's okay. I'm fine with that. I would also like to reiterate what Mr. Graves said, that I appreciate the chamber putting this event on. I also want to say thank you to the numerous voters that have already showed up for the early voter events. So it's been good seeing all you coming through the last few days. I do agree with the 1/4 cent sales tax. I think it is very important for the safety of our children. I know that there are some concerns out there from some people about how the money may be spent, and they think maybe this is a smoke screen for some other things. But I do believe with the way that it has been set up, and as Mr. Graves said, the plan is spelled out in very much detail on the Stanley County Schools webpage. Things like he said, the safety, the security vestibule, the card readers, the IdentiKid system. Those are things that we need here to keep our children safe. I know that in Union County and Cabarrus County, those systems are already in place. As a school board member, I will make sure that those tax dollars are spent wisely and are spent for the children, because our children come first, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running is to make sure that the decisions that are made are all in the best interests of the children. And if a children feel safe at school and they're fed, then learning can happen. So we need to, increase learning and increase the scores in our schools. And if we can do that by making them safe, then they can learn.
Thank you. Ms. Hesley, the next question is yours, and the question will be identical for both of you. What is the biggest challenge to Stanley County schools, and how can this challenge be addressed?
I think one of the biggest challenges is to improve our system so that we are competitive with other counties around us and in North Carolina. I know there's been a lot of people concerned about the recent report cards, the state grading system, and people are concerned about the scores there. But those scores are mainly based on a measurement of the performance, and that scoring system does not look at growth in students. As Dr. James has stated before, the grades are basically a measurement of school poverty and not really a true indication of what's going on in our schools. I think we have fantastic teachers and educators in our county. I think we need, one of a big challenge is that we need to have more teacher assistants helping in the early grades, K through 3. That is very, very important. And in order to keep the quality of teachers that we have here, we've got to do some things that keep our teachers here in Stanley County. Research shows that the most important factor in a student's education is teacher quality. And as a teacher, I understand that these demands and our needs of our students. We're losing teachers to surrounding counties that offer higher supplements. So one of the things that I really would like to see is increased supplements and for our teachers, administrators, and for our coaches. They're also very important influences on our children. And I feel like as a former educator, I know the importance, and I will fight for teachers and fight for the children as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grazer, you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's okay. And I agree with everything that Ms. Hesley here has said, and the importance of everything that she mentioned. And I agree, those are very important priorities for the school system. To me, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is something that I've spoken about in front of the school board before and also the county commissioners, the biggest challenge that we have facing us in the school system is trust. And the reason why I say that is that I believe that people could make a valid argument that the school system was poorly managed for several decades. And after the financial crisis of 2008, it was very evident that the school system was in need of serious leadership. Unfortunately, we didn't have that. And what resulted was a crisis of confidence between the county commissioners, the taxpayers, the citizens of Stanley County, and the school system. And teachers and administrators, principals, assistant principals were caught in the middle. And it was a very unfair position for them to find themselves in. And this lack of trust all surrounds or all revolves around the issue of the budget, the school budget. And the last couple of years, if you followed what's happened in the county, because of the financial constraints that the school system found themselves in, there were really two camps that evolved. You had one camp that was a very small but very vocal group of individuals that looked to take the easy way out and find savings by closing schools. They came up with something called Plan A and Plan B. Well, the school system came up with the idea, and then there were some supporters in the community that supported the idea. And I was opposed to it because I believe that you could summarize Plan A and Plan B as the school system balancing its budget on the backs of minorities and small communities. The group that I belong to, which is a much larger group, was a group that said, we need to take a thoughtful approach to how we balance our budget and how we manage the school system. And it's real simple. It's 3 parts. Number one, we identify waste, something that all the county commissioners were begging the school system to do for years. And then we put in place systems of transparency and accountability to make sure that that waste doesn't creep back into the system. Number two, we make sure that we identify every single federal and state dollar that we can bring back into the school system that we're entitled to as taxpayers here in Stanley County. And number three, that we apply for every grant that we are eligible for, and even some that we might not be eligible for. But if we do those 3 things, we can go with confidence to the county commissioners if there is a deficit, if we find that we need additional money, and I know we do, to accomplish all the priorities that Joanne has spelled out tonight and that we've spoken about here in this room for years, then we can go to the county commissioners and they're going to know that we've done everything we could to make up any budget shortfall. And I believe that they're going to work with us once we restore that trust. So I think that reestablishing trust is the highest priority for the school system.
Thank you. Both of you sort of answered my third question. So I'm gonna try to improvise. There's a national study recently that shows that I believe 70% of the public believes that we should have pre-K for everybody. And of course that can't happen without state help to do that. But there are also studies that show that that pre-K gives you an advantage for a short period of time, but then sometimes it goes away as you migrate down into the other grades. So I would ask, Mr. Graves, you're up first. Would you be in favor, do you feel that pre-K would help our students?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And in interest of transparency for everyone out there, both of us were provided with a series of topics that we may cover tonight in questions, and this is one of the topics that we were given, and that was what are the pluses and minuses of the pre-K education program or pre-K education in general. And I had to do some research because I'm not an educator, and it was real interesting to me. And first of all, I was surprised that it was limited. It was a limited program. I would have assumed that it would have been available for everyone regardless of their background. But students have to qualify for pre-K. And what that means is that depending upon whether or not they meet certain income thresholds or if they have cognitive or physical impairments that are maybe keeping them back from kids in the same age group, they qualify for this pre-K program. But one of the things that strikes me is the fact that we have a lot of single parent households, and we also have a lot of households that have two parents that are both working. And unlike years past where maybe there was someone at home that could help prepare a child for school before they entered the kindergarten, there are also a lot of families that they don't have the financial resources to send their children to some of the high quality daycares that we have in Stanley County, like Quality Child Care for One, and Oakboro has won a lot of awards for the work that they've done in pre-K education. But for me, I think that pre-K education should be available to everyone because, as Joanne pointed out earlier, all educators will tell you that kindergarten through third grade are the most formative years for students. And if we can set them up for success for those early grades, that I think that success will carry through for the remainder of their school. Certainly it will here in Stanley County because we have outstanding teachers and children do get a great education here in Stanley County. So I would say if there's a minus to pre-K education, it's that it's not available currently to everyone. So I would support the expansion. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Hester, I'll give you the same question.
Thank you. I'm excited that you asked me this question because this is my passion. My original degree is in early childhood education, and as Mr. Graves said, pre-K is so important in a child's life, and the fact that we can provide them with public pre-K is even more important. It helps to make the field more level when children enter. Right now, only 22% of children that are of the pre-K age are getting the pre-K program. So we're only serving 22%. Currently, our Governor Cooper, has a goal that we will increase that to 55% by 2025, which I'm excited about that, and I hope that continues. Children in these types of programs gain confidence, they learn to work together, they learn those school routines through these programs. And I just think it is vital and very, very important. North Carolina does have one of 5, or North Carolina is one of 5 states in the nation that meets the benchmarks for quality education at the pre-K level. So our state has a great pre-K program, and we need to take advantage of that and continue to expand it. It's said that for every $1 that we invest in preschool, that will save the taxpayers $13 in future costs. So it's a very good investment for you as a citizen, and it is a good investment for our children. I strongly support pre-K. Like I said, this is my passion. There's only positives about this program. I do know of a young lady that recently was trying to get her child into the pre-K program, and her child wouldn't qualify because he was just an average child. The young lady worked as a teacher assistant, and she didn't qualify because she made over the certain amount for her child to be able to attend. So after figuring out and making calculations here and there, she figured out that the cost of pre-K for her, I think, was like $600 a month. It was going to be almost cheaper for her to quit her job and allow her child to qualify for the free pre-K. And it shouldn't be like that. But that's what happened. And that young lady was my daughter. And, I think that it is important that every child, we've got to get to that goal of 100%. But I'm very glad that Governor Cooper is looking at that 55% goal for the future. Thank you.
Let's thank these candidates for their thoughtful comments.
Folks, I want to thank all of you for being with us this evening. I want to thank board members that were here with us this evening, and Dr. Michael Ryman for facilitating the entire night. Help me give him a round of applause. I also want to thank every candidate that participated tonight. You offering your time, your talent to be a part of our community and to grow our community and make it stronger is critical. It's important to the sustainability of the future of everything that Albemarle and all other 9 municipalities and Stanley County have, and what we can contribute to the Charlotte region and to the state of North Carolina. So help me thank the candidates for being with us tonight as well.
I found it.
Again, thank you all for participating. Thank you as voters for being well informed. We thank you for being with us.